Davis, 26 for D'Angelo Russell. Austin Reeves had 25 and 11 assists. Clippers star Paul George has a sprained right knee. He'll be evaluated in 2 to 3 weeks. George is expected to miss the Clippers' final 9 games of the regular season. The NCAA tournament resumes tonight. UCLA is a 2-point favorite over Gonzaga in the West Regional Semifinal in Las Vegas. 6:45 tip-off on CBS. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by Original Taco Pete.
It's Aaron from Original Taco Pete. Let us cater your March Madness munchies. Order with us at Original Taco Pete on Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, or stop into our Slauson and Crenshaw location. We'll feed you soon.
Hi, I'm civil rights attorney Areva Martin, host of Areva Martin in Real Time. Weekdays, 4 to 6 p.m. right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Be sure to tune in weekdays at 4:35 p.m. for your daily download on the federal bribery trial of LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. The case is sure to have many twists and turns, and our program will be the show of record in the case of United States versus Mark Ridley Thomas. We have our own seasoned justice correspondent who will be checking in with us to keep you up to speed on the daily details of this high-profile legal case. Be sure to tune in to Areva Martin in Real Time weekdays at 4:35 p.m. for United States versus Mark Ridley Thomas, only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Order in the court.
Live from Leimert Park, USA, I'm Tavis Smiley, and you're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. So glad to see you and me back in stride again. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. All of our socials can be found at KBLA 1580. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, everything at KBLA 1580. Let me also invite you right now to download our app at KBLA 1580. Download the app and take us with you anywhere in the world and listen to us in real time, but only by downloading our app right now at KBLA 1580. Should you miss us any day in real time, check out the podcast of this program by going to the app, the website, Anchor, Spotify, Apple, so many places to get the podcast and listen to us at your leisure. Should you miss us any day in real time, but I am delighted to have you along live with us today for the next 3 hours. You can also watch the live stream of this program by tapping on the KBLA TV icon on our app or by going to our YouTube channel. Let me also invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. Another great show on tap for you today in our second hour. What if the problem of racism has no solution? What if there's just no solution to the issue of racism as we know it? The argument of Afro-pessimism with Dr. Frank B. Wilderson III in hour 2. In our third hour, what promises to be a compelling conversation on the modern science of psychology based on one of Yale's most popular courses of all time. Lucky for you, you get to audit that class today for free when Yale Professor Emeritus Dr. Paul Bloom joins us in hour 3 to discuss his latest work, Psych, the Story of the Human Mind. Paul Bloom of Yale joins us in hour 3. But to commence today's program, let's talk politics with John Nichols, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine and the co-author of Bernie Sanders' new book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. Welcome back, John. How are you, sir?
I am well, sir, and it's an honor to be with you.
Likewise, always an honor to be in dialogue with you. So much to talk about in this hour. President Biden, is moments away from giving a major address on the 13th anniversary, believe it or not, of the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare is now 13 years old. We'll talk about that in this hour. The Manhattan DA has clapped back on the House GOP's unprecedented inquiry into their investigation of Donald Trump and what we expect may be a pending indictment by that grand jury. The DA's office clapped back yesterday. We'll talk about that and what they had to say about this Republican meddling, as it were, into their business. We'll talk about that and a great deal more. Let me start, though, John, by congratulating you, first of all, on the Bernie Sanders text. For those who haven't seen it as yet, what's the book about?
The book is really about all the challenges that we have today. I mean, this situation where, we have tens of millions of people who either don't have health care coverage or have inadequate health care coverage and are worried on it, all the time about whether if they get sick, they might go bankrupt because health care isn't treated as a right. It's treated as a privilege. And certainly Obamacare made it better, but it's still, we have a real gap there. Young people who want to go to college, who have the skills, who have the knowledge, but can't afford it, or if they can't afford it, they end up with huge amounts of debt. Workers who, show up early, stay late, do everything they're supposed to do, and still don't make enough money to, keep above the poverty line. And when you put all of these things together, I mean, you understand these are the real problems that Americans wrestle with on a daily basis. And yet, so often our discussions in America are about somebody down the street that we're not supposed to like, or somebody, at the border that we're not supposed to like, or somebody that doesn't look like us that we're not supposed to like. We've got all these fights about personalities, about, groups that are supposed to be divided from one another, and we don't spend enough time talking about the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is that as a country, we've let capitalism get out of control. Yeah. Doesn't mean capitalism has to go away. Doesn't mean, it's not saying you got to get rid of it. It is saying that you can't have it be so out of control, so unregulated, so misdirected that you have a billionaire class that keeps getting richer and everybody else is struggling.
A couple questions in that regard. Number one, and I'm not naive, of course, in asking this, but at this moment,
I know.
Yeah, at this moment in late modernity, 2023, why is healthcare in the richest nation in the history of the world not a right?
Well, it's very profitable for those who are providing it, right? The pharmaceutical companies, which are now talking about jacking up prices on COVID shots to astronomical levels. The insurance companies, and really, we even acknowledge it in our discussions. We talk about a healthcare industry, right? Not healthcare providers per se. And this isn't against doctors. This isn't against nurses. It's not against your local hospital that may do a great job. That's not the point. The point is that there's a system in place now that prioritizes profits and that basically says, to somebody who's sick, you've got to jump through all kinds of hoops just to get the insurance you paid for. And if you didn't pay for enough and if you don't have it in the right place in the right way, you may get cancer or heart condition or something like that and end up bankrupt. And that's just not that's misdirected priorities. And Senator Sanders and I make that argument that our priorities need to be redirected so that, frankly, healthcare is treated as a right, education is treated as a right. Doesn't mean that we may not pay a little bit for it, but we're not going to be ruined by it. And then ultimately, when we get this redirection, if and when we ever do, then we get to a situation where, people are really freed. You have a lot more freedom to make decisions about whether you want to leave a job that you were keeping just because you want to keep that health care, for a young person to really follow their dreams and know that they're not going to come out of college with massive debt so that they can go into the career they wanted, not have to, for lack of a better term, sell out and look for something where they can get the biggest paycheck. So there's a lot of freedom that comes with getting a better organization of our economic system.
Before I move forward, is it just you, Bernie Sanders, and me, or are there other Americans who think that it is absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for, unconscionable to your earlier point, that the pharmaceutical industry could be looking again to jack up prices on COVID shots. Just days ago, we were told these things were mandatory, right? It was mandatory to save our country, to deal with this pandemic. We had to get COVID shots. There were folk who pushed back on that. Many Americans didn't want to get it, didn't trust the science, et cetera, et cetera. But days ago, we were just told that we had to get these shots. And now, days later, they're literally trying to jack the prices up now on you getting a COVID shot. Like, what? How does one process that?
Well, I mean, I think this is something that's across all industries. The pharmaceutical industry stands out because we're really talking about health and people's lives, and that becomes very fundamental. But we're in an era now, Tavis, where we've got companies that literally report record profits and the same day announce price increases, right? And so we're kind of in a situation where it's never enough, right? The billionaire class, it's never enough. They are billionaires now. They want to be trillionaires someday. And for an awful lot of corporations, they're not satisfied with a reasonable profit, with a reasonable circumstance. They want to make more. And you get to the heart of the matter when you're saying, when you've got things that people are told they have to have, right? When you're talking about essentials in life, and again, you're right. People may disagree about, whether they want the shot, things like that. But if they're told, you got to get this for your job, or you got to get this for your schooling, or whatever, those companies should not be allowed to, jack prices to a level where, somebody in a sense of urgency, right? Maybe if their insurance isn't, up to speed, or if they've got other challenges, they're going into their pocket and they're deciding, I got to pay this $100, or I got to pay whatever this amount is. And that means, I'm going to have to not eat so well this week, or give up other things in my life. We shouldn't, as regards to issues of healthcare, we shouldn't be in that circumstance in 2023.
Yeah. As I said earlier, today's the 13th anniversary, at least President Biden, moments away from now, giving a major address celebrating the 13th anniversary of Obamacare. When we come forward with John Nichols, I want to ask one or two other quick questions right quick about his critique of capitalism, given that he has co-authored this book with Bernie Sanders. It's the title is It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. I love that title. It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. Co-authored by Bernie Sanders, and our guest in this hour, the national affairs correspondent for The Nation magazine, John Nichols. A great deal more to unpack with John Nichols in this hour when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Let's be real. Mopping is a hassle. You have to fill the bucket, pushing a wet, heavy mop around, then cleaning the mop when you're done so it doesn't grow bacteria. A hassle on top of a hassle. Try Swiffer Wet Jet. With Swiffer Wet Jet, you start with a fresh pad and cleaning solution every time. And when you're done, you just toss the pad. Swiffer Wet Jet, the faster, easier, cleaner way to clean your floors.
The all-new Nissan Ariya is a fully loaded EV. It's brimming with style and power.
Up to 389 horses of it.
Innovation and intelligence.
E-Force all-wheel drive.
It'll pin you to your seat.
Your very plush seat.
The all-new, all-electric Nissan Ariya. Nissan Ariya with E-Force expected availability early 2023. E-Force cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. E-Force and 389 horsepower available on Platinum Plus. Nissan calculation using 1-foot rollout testing with long-range battery and E-Force only in sport mode with E-Step off. These results are for comparison only and should not be attempted on public roads. Drive responsibly. See nissanusa.com for details.
With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
Join Black Wealth Matters, an educational series as we explore and explain the Black College Athletes Playbook in a 5-part series starting April 6th. Dr. Devarian Baldwin, an award-winning scholar and author, seen in Time, CNBC, and more, helps us follow the college dollars. Coach John Mosley, fan favorite of Netflix's docuseries Last Chance U, covers the new world of the college athletes. David McGriff, one of the leaders in the NIL and sports world and owner of the McGriff Agency, explains NIL and the effects on Black athletes. Keisha Richardson gives the challenges of raising a Black athlete. And last, for the bonus series, we want to give athletes the tools to capitalize from their name and likeness with swimming bronze medalist from the 2021 Paralympics, Jamal Hill. There is no cost for the series. It's a live webinar. Questions are welcome. Register on KBLA1580.com.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Let's unpack a bit more with John Nichols, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine, co-author of the new book with Senator Bernie Sanders, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. In this particular moment, John, which we'll get to in a moment, talking about the banks, I saw your piece recently how they lobbied for deregulation, Congress capitulated, and the banks are collapsing now. We'll come to that in a moment. But given this moment that we are in, where people are thinking about the issue of capitalism, given what's happening in the banking sector, what is your critique of capitalism?
Look, my critique of capitalism is that it's rooted in the fact I grew up in a small town in rural United States, and we had a main street with businesses up and down that street run by different folks, and you know, some of them were good folks, some of them maybe not perfect, but you know, they were all part of our community, and if they made money, they put that money back into the community, and you know, that was a form of capitalism that worked pretty well. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes in a city or bigger place, you got to get a little bigger, and I understand that as well. But my critique is, and I think it's something that runs through the book, that, you know, we have run into a situation in the United States now where for so long, because of money in politics, because of very, very influential people with a lot of power and a lot of connections, a lot of lobbyists, we've ended up in a situation where we have very little regulation of what our pharmaceutical companies do, what our healthcare industry does, what a lot of our industries do, and really an insufficient taxation of the very, very wealthy, the billionaires. I always remind folks that during COVID, you know, at the start of COVID, the 30 billionaires in the United States controlled about $3.5 trillion in wealth. A year or so into it, they had $5 trillion. So while all the rest of us were engaged in shared sacrifice, we had a handful of people who were getting dramatically richer in the midst of this incredibly difficult time. And ultimately, it shouldn't be like that. Mm-hmm. I go back to the Franklin Roosevelt model, where Roosevelt said, you know, when the country's in a really tough position, those who are making big profits, right? What he would describe as excess profits. Mm-hmm. They've got to pay a lot of that back into the Treasury, whether it's in a depression or whether it's in during a war or something like that. And I think we've lost sight of that sense of shared sacrifice as a country. And so that's my critique, that we really need to get back to, you know, that sort of FDR model where if somebody's making a huge profit at a time when everybody else is struggling, maybe they should pay a little more taxes.
How central, this is, I'm not being sophomoric here, but I do want to probe your...
No, of course not.
I want to probe your insight on this. How central is this conundrum of money and politics to the overall malaise, the drama that we're dealing with?
I think it's absolutely central to it. Yeah. And we don't talk about it enough. I mean, we're all aware of it, but I live in Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin. And where I live, we have a big Supreme Court race coming up on April 4th. It's for one seat on the state Supreme Court, and it's looking like roughly, you know, $40 to $50 million will be spent. It'll be the most expensive court race in the history of the United States. And we're starting to see this again and again all over. Election contests getting dramatically more expensive, and there's a huge reliance on big contributions, big money, whether it comes directly to a candidate or a party or whether it's done through so-called independent expenditures that everybody knows where it's coming from. The end result is that when people get to elected office, they've got a lot of strings attached. Not everybody. We have some honorable folks that we can point to. but an awful lot of them come with a sense of loyalty, if you will, to those who paid for their campaigns. And our failure to address money in politics has really warped our processes. It impacts debates about, as I said before, healthcare, education, workplace. And I give you one quick example.
Mm-hmm.
Polling shows roughly 70% of Americans, or in the 60s, I should say, relatively well into the 60s, think trade unions are great. They love unions, right? And yet our unionization rate in the United States is going down, or if at best it's stable, and it's very, very low. Now, how do you have that disconnect?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, powerful people lobby to make it hard to join a union.
Yep. We're in the throes of that right now in LA, as you well know. The teachers are on strike here.
I've been watching it.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Today is day 3. It was a 3-day, a called 3-day strike. Today is the 3rd day of this strike, and it's really a strike brought on by SEIU 99, the local union here, on behalf of the other workers in the system, the cafeteria workers and the janitors, etc. These are the poorest paid people in this system. They average about $25,000 a year in annual income. So the teachers, UTLA, United Teachers Los Angeles, as you know, went out on strike with, in solidarity with these other workers represented by SEIU 99. Again, today is the 3rd day of that teacher strike. But it puts front and center the issue, John, of unionization in this country right now, and how it is that corporations, or in this instance, a school board, sitting on billions of dollars, can be so cheap when it comes to a living wage for everyday people.
Mm-hmm. You got to the heart of it right there. And this is something that affects the public sector and the private sector. And we shouldn't have a situation in the richest country in the world, and frankly, in a city with a great deal of wealth, where somebody gets up before dawn, rides a bus across town to work in a cafeteria, works hard all day, gets back, late in the day for their own kids, and yet struggles to keep above the poverty line, struggles to get housing, struggles to, even possibly put something aside for educating their kids down the line. There's got to be a better way to do it. And one of the better ways to do it is to make sure that nobody's working full time, ever goes below that poverty line. And in fact, poverty shouldn't be our baseline. We should be well above that as a society.
Yeah, and that's the real rub for me, that you have Americans who are working full-time jobs who are still living below the poverty line. That's the part that's just unacceptable, that you're working full-time and you still can't raise your head above the poverty line. I digress on that particular issue. The book that John has just co-authored with Senator Bernie Sanders, is called It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. And in this moment, John, a whole lot of folk are angry about capitalism, given what's happening in the banking industry. And I think it's fair to say that many of us, never mind the moves that have been made, never mind the reassuring words of President Biden or the actions of Janet Yellen, there are many people who are still a little scared, and perhaps some folks still, and perhaps some of these folks in the banking industry themselves, still a little concerned about how shaky things are at the moment. I saw your recent piece. I love the title, Bankers Lobbied for Deregulation, Congress Capitulated, and Now Banks Are Collapsing. Unpack that for me briefly here.
It's pretty simple. Back when we had the last major meltdown of our banks and of our financial services industry in 2007 into 2008, it didn't just affect the banks. It affected the whole of the economy. We had people losing their homes. We had unemployment going through the roof. You remember when Barack Obama became president, he inherited a huge mess, right? And it affected everything he did as president. And the response to that crisis in the fall of 2008 was to bail out the banks and to bail out the big corporations. That didn't work out so well. It didn't ultimately work out so well for a lot of working folks, frankly, overall for the economy, at least in the short term. Now, fast forward to today. What happened after the 2008 meltdown was that we had a lot of talk about, we've got to get our banks under control so they can't be, quote unquote, too big to fail.
Yeah.
And we put in regulations, we put in rules. The concept was that, if a bank was of a certain size, it's going to have to be monitored closely. In fact, all banks are going to be monitored. Well, the bankers didn't like that. They lobbied very, very hard. and they got a change in the rules in 2018 that said that banks with under $250 billion, that's $250 billion, banks with under $250 billion had a much more lax oversight, much more relaxed regulation. And those are the banks now that are failing, right? Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank. And so what happened was Washington, and this is not just Republicans, there are Democrats who voted for this as well. They created a circumstance where we knew that these banks needed to be regulated, and we lowered the regulation, and we had this claim that they were quote unquote community banks, right? Now, you and I know what a community bank is. It's the bank, in our small town or in our neighborhood in the city. It's the bank where we know the banker, we know the owner of the bank, right? That's a community bank. These are huge, huge financial institutions, and with massive amounts of money, very influential in certain industries. And as a country, we just weren't regulating them sufficiently, and there's more of them. That's the problem. That's why people feel insecure. Now, it's true that Silicon Valley Bank made some of its own mistakes, and we can talk about that more if you want. But this broader reality that we've got a lot of banks that are underregulated, that don't have sufficient oversight, that's why people are nervous. And they're also concerned about how the Biden administration and other folks are responding to this, because there seems to be, they don't want to call it a bailout, but there's an awful lot of money flowing toward very wealthy people at this point, feeling a little bit like 2008.
Two things in that regard. Number one, I'm watching my clock here. We got sports news and traffic in about 2 minutes, so we'll continue when we move forward here. But two things in that regard. Number one, I've said this repeatedly on this program. The president keeps saying no taxpayer dollars will be involved in this. And I ask one simple question. If it ain't our money, whose money is it? I mean, where is the money coming from? At some point, the president has got to come clean. You can't keep telling us that no taxpayer dollars will be involved in this. You don't want to use the word bailout. Well, if it's not our money, then tell me whose money it is that you are using to address this particular issue. I can assure you, one way or another, when this equation gets solved, it's going to be your money and my money. I can assure you of that, number one. Number two, I'm glad you put your finger on this. It's one of the reasons why I'm not brown-nosing here. I'm being honest. It's one of the reasons why I love The Nation magazine, because The Nation calls it as they see it. And I love you and I love your work because you guys are so honest and so transparent. And nobody wants to say this. Everybody's now talking about the meltdown, as it were. Nobody wants to call it a meltdown. But at the end of the day, to your point, there were Republicans and Democrats who capitulated when Silicon Valley Bank and these other banks came in and asked for less stringent deregulations. Mark Warner of Virginia comes to mind. There are any number of other Democrats. Nobody wants to call them by their name, but Democrats, along with Republicans, allowed this to happen. And here we are again in this mess. And nobody ever seems to me, John, to want to tell the truth about that reality, about Democrats involved in this.
Well, that's why I wrote about it. And that's why I did the vote count. I did the vote count in my article, and in the Senate, you had 17 Democrats who voted with 50 Republicans to do this. They made it a bipartisan bill. In the House, you had 33 Democrats who voted with the Republicans to do this. And it's too easy to just blame Republicans.
Sure.
The fact of the matter is, this banking lobbying affects both parties.
And that's why, again, I love The Nation. I love John's pieces. The piece I just referenced a moment ago, you might want to find it online at The Nation. Bankers lobbied for deregulation. Congress capitulated, and now banks are collapsing. It's the best thing I've read so far on how this really happened and who's really to blame. And some of that, those persons to blame vote like you and I vote. I'll leave it at that. When we come forward, we'll continue our conversation with John Nichols. We'll talk about the president giving a speech any moment now about the 13th anniversary of Obamacare. The Manhattan DA claps back, and a few other things to get to with John Nichols when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on a Thursday. It is March 23rd. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Interest rate hikes may soon come to an end. That's according to the latest projections from the Federal Reserve. It has what's called the terminal rate at 5.1%. The latest rate hike pushed rates up to 5%. This story is out of Alabama. Montgomery's mayor is looking to be reelected. Stephen Reed greeted supporters Wednesday at an announcement from his campaign at Gateway Park. He said he has plans to invest more in skills training programs to prepare students and others with no degrees with good-paying jobs. Voters elected Reed to be Montgomery's first black mayor back in 2019. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Got a crash in Atwater Village, block on the middle lane on the 2 southbound near the 5 interchange. That's causing some slowing from San Fernando Road, so that's unusual for Highway 2. In Pomona on the 71 southbound, you got some potholes in the left-hand lane. This is right on Mission Boulevard. Traffic is so from the 10 and the 57. And just a heads up for the weekend, they're going to completely close the 71 Friday night, Saturday night, and again on Monday and Tuesday night. In Fountain Valley, got a vehicle stall 405 open at Euclid Avenue, causing some slowing in the area.
When you want the best deal on the best meal, choose Wendy's 2 for $6. Pick from Dave's Single, Spicy Chicken Sandwich, 10-piece Crispy Nugs, or a medium strawberry lemonade. Pair any 2 for just $6. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's 2 for $6.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers beat Phoenix by 11 last night. 3 players scored 25 or more. 27 for Anthony Davis, 26 for D'Angelo Russell. Austin Reeves had 25 and 11 assists. Clippers star Paul George has a sprained right knee. He'll be evaluated in 2 to 3 weeks. George is expected to miss the Clippers' final 9 games of the regular season. The NCAA tournament resumes tonight. UCLA is a 2-point favorite over Gonzaga in the West Regional Semifinal in Las Vegas. 6:45 tip-off on CBS. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by Original Taco Pete.
It's Aaron from Original Taco Pete. Let us cater your March Madness munchies. Order with us at Original Taco Pete on Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, or stop into our Slauson and Crenshaw location. We'll feed you soon.
I'm young, gifted, and black. KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates Women's History Month, sponsored by Walmart. As we celebrate Women's History Month this month, KBLA Talk 1580 would like to spotlight women leaders in our community who are creating positive change. If you or someone you know is making a difference in your community, please nominate them with a 50-word or less post on why you feel they should be included in the KBLA Women's Series, sponsored by Walmart. These women leaders will be featured on KBLA, interviewed on KBLA, and participate in a panel discussion hosted by Reva Martin in real time. Visit the KBLA app or log on to KBLA1580.com to nominate a woman in your community that is creating positive change. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action.
KBLA 1580 Talk Radio congratulates Sal's Gumbo Shack for this Women's History Month. Surviving the pandemic and social unrest, Sal's Gumbo Shack continued to hold the community up with great food to all that came through the doors. Are you ready for the best gumbo in town? The best po' boy you've had? Sal's Gumbo Shack. We bring the bayou to you with real authentic soul food. Mama and Granny's recipes made with real butter, real love, real everything. Also introducing a healthy option from our jackfruit selection. And there's more. Mouth-watering desserts, peach cobbler, banana pudding, red and blue velvet cake, 7-Up pound cake, homemade with lots of love. To order, call 562-423-2113. That's 562-423-2113. Sal's is also providing training and employment to those serious about a career in the food industry and the opportunity to perhaps own your own Sal's Gumbo Shack one day. Visit salsgumboshack.com or stop by either locations, Bixby Knolls or Long Beach Boulevard, Sal's Gumbo Shack.
Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis Smiley. He's John Nichols, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine, co-author of the new book with Senator Bernie Sanders. It's called It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. And we've been talking about why so many of us are, in fact, angry right about now about capitalism. And one of those issues is what's happening in the banking industry. Let me ask one quick question about that, John, before we move forward. So what do you think this story is going? It's always, of course, your job as a writer to stay ahead of the story and to kind of have some sense of where the narrative is taking us. We know where we are right now, but where's this banking story going to lead, do you think?
Well, let's hope it leads toward some serious congressional discussion about reinstating some of the Dodd-Frank regulations, particularly on these regional banks with as much as $250 billion, but a much more lax regulation than the bigger banks. So that's one thing to do.
Right.
Second, we need to look at how the FDIC operates. The FDIC is a Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a insurance agency, essentially, and it's insurance for the banks, right? The banks pay in a portion, a small amount, and that's supposed to take care of situations where a bank gets in trouble. But when we've got a lot of vulnerable banks, and we've got a couple major banks going down, we have to have a better sense of how the FDIC should operate and whether it really should, as President Biden has suggested here, at least in this case with Silicon Valley Bank, back up investors, not with up to $250,000, but with millions and millions of dollars. That's putting the U.S. on the hook. And if we do that, if we set that new standard, then the FDIC is not going to be able to sustain, if we have a major meltdown. And so that's going to where you get into the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And the final thing I just recommend is we've got to take a much more serious look at the Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be monitoring these banks. They're supposed to be aware of what's going on and have a good sense of how to manage it. They stumbled on this pretty badly in a number of cases. And when they're, raising these interest rates, which I understand why they're doing it to deal with inflation, but when they're doing that, that has a real impact on the banks themselves. Yeah. And they've got to think about that. So that's where I hope it's going. Mm-hmm. But I fear very quickly, that, we may, move on to the next story and lose sight of this, not get the re-regulation, not, re-examine the FDIC, not look at how the Fed operates, and remain very, very vulnerable to another meltdown.
Remain vulnerable and just magically return to business as usual, right? That's how we do it,
yep.
Sadly, in D.C. You mentioned earlier all the drama that Barack Obama inherited when he became president. Indeed, he did. But I think it's fair to say, and if he were here right now, I'm sure he'd say the same thing. The thing he's probably most proud of is the Affordable Care Act, derisively called Obamacare initially, and now everybody calls it Obamacare. Mm-hmm. But we are now celebrating, the White House is, the Biden-Harris administration, celebrating today the 13th anniversary of Obamacare, the president giving a major speech in a moment, if not already started. And then he's off to Canada to talk to Justin Trudeau. But today, celebrating 13 years of Obamacare. Some quick data here. HHS, Health and Human Services, a new report out today shows that more than 40 million people, 40 million fellow citizens, are currently enrolled in Marketplace or Medicaid expansion coverage related to provisions of the Affordable Care Act. This is the highest total on record. Again, the Vice President Harris and President Biden are celebrating that. Of course, Joe Biden was vice president for Barack Obama when the ACA got through. There are many of us then, John, I think you were one of them. I certainly was. There are many of us then who were disappointed. On the one hand, glad to see that something got done. On the other hand, my critique was that Obama and at the time Rahm Emanuel as chief of staff negotiated against themselves. And I think more could have been done on the health care front. They promised on the campaign trail, that is to say, Obama promised universal health care. This ain't quite universal health care, but to his credit, at least something got done. 13 years later, what do you make of what he got done?
Well, I think it's huge. Look, we should fully recognize what an important part of a lot of people's lives this is. This is a reform of the healthcare system that made it possible for a lot of people to get access to health care. And it's gotten better, right, over the years. It's become a much more efficient and workable program. So much like Social Security, you see an improvement. And so give President Obama his due,
sure,
just as you give Roosevelt his due for Social Security, but then recognize that it's our job to make the improvement, right? And the improvement we've got to make is to get ourselves to a situation where everybody has absolutely sufficient health care so that if they get sick, and they don't have the threat of bankruptcy, they don't have to have the threat of economic ruin. And Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, has provided a lot of security, a lot of protection, and we ought to celebrate it. There's no reason to talk it down, but there is a reason to say this is not enough. This is not sufficient, and we've got to look. It's interesting, the president's going to Canada.
Yep.
When he's up there in Canada, he can talk to Justin Trudeau about the Canadian healthcare system, which is very efficient and which provides an immense amount of healthcare at a lower cost.
Yeah. There was a point in time, and I want to ask you whether or not we have moved from that particular space, but there was a point in time, as you recall, that Republicans were doing every single thing they could every waking hour of the day, to your point, to talk down Obamacare, to destroy it. There were Supreme Court challenges. I mean, we remember that moment where they were determined, as Mitch McConnell said the day Obama got inaugurated, to make sure he was not going to be successful as a president. So they have attacked this thing 18 ways from Sunday. I'm not covering this every day, but it seems to me, from the outside looking in, that they've sort of backed off of the attack of Obamacare, which would mean that it is now going to be, not just codified in the way Americans receive their health care, but codified, in fact, even in the law. So maybe, having said that, I'm misreading that. Have they backed off of their vicious daily attacks on the program?
Yeah, I think they have, because they know an awful lot of people who they represent are relying on the program.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're fully on board for supporting it. There's still efforts to undermine it at various points. But that huge push to take it down has pretty much disappeared. Reason for that, obviously, it's a popular program.
Yeah.
Also one that people recognize as necessary. And, this has happened before.
Yeah.
That you had a lot of Republicans and even some Democrats who were very critical of Social Security back in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And boy, that whole New Deal program ultimately came to be very well regarded. In fact, Eisenhower embraced most of it.
Yeah.
And then again, you had a lot of folks, many of them Republicans, attacking Medicare and Medicaid back in the 1960s when LBJ was doing it. And they still sometimes want to nickel and dime those programs, want to go at them. But it's very rare, the political figure now who says that you ought to get rid of Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid.
Yep. Speaking of Republicans, let me pivot to another piece I saw of yours recently, where you argue that Republicans are not really trying to win popular vote majorities. Unpack that for us right quick here.
Sure. We've seen it, frankly, in the last couple of election cycles. In 2016, the Republican presidential candidate, Donald Trump, lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. In 2020, he lost it by 7 million votes. And so what has happened is that Republicans have decided they want to win close, right? They want to win, even if they don't get a majority of the vote. They want to win in enough places via the Electoral College, via gerrymandering, via small states that have disproportionate influence in the U.S. Senate, so that they can govern. But they are not inclined, and there's a lot of evidence of this, to campaign in a way that really does build a big popular majority. Like Eisenhower used to win with, getting close to 60% of the vote, right? It's possible to do that as a Republican, but to do that, you have to be open to, some compromise, to some outreach to communities that don't traditionally vote Republican. They have abandoned a lot of that. And as a result, that really feeds the divisions in our country. Instead of, trying to build big majorities, which requires you to have a popular platform, they've tended increasingly in recent years to be much more satisfied with a very rough, aggressive, challenging platform, which does divide people. It certainly energizes their base, but it's not going for that, that sort of level of victory that really might be a unifying victory for the country.
Yeah. Speaking of Republicans, when we come forward, we'll talk about Republicans specifically in the House. If you were listening to our program earlier this week, and I hope you were, we're on every day 9 a.m. to 12 noon Pacific time. Republican lawmakers earlier this week sought information about this probe by the Manhattan DA. Specifically, they wanted Alvin Bragg, the DA in Manhattan, the first African-American to be DA in Manhattan. They wanted him and his office to show up for a congressional inquiry about his investigation. What are you doing up there in New York? And why are we hearing stories about an imminent indictment, and arrest of Donald Trump, et cetera, et cetera? So they literally had the gall to call for a congressional investigation into the investigation of Donald Trump in Manhattan. Well, the Manhattan DA's office, Alvin Bragg, has finally clapped back. We'll unpack that for you when we come forward with John Nichols on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dominique DePrima, host of First Things First, weekday mornings from 6 to 9. Join me tomorrow for breaking news on the police killing of Charles Towns in Altadena with civil rights attorney Kerry Harper. Plus, meet vocalist, composer, pianist V. Shane Frederick. That's Friday, only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Hello, this is Dr. Rosa Milligan, self-appointed mayor of South Central Los Angeles, calling authors and business owners. Get ready for Black Writers on Tour, plus Business and Tech Expo, Saturday, March 25th, 2023, 10 to 3 p.m. It's a face-to-face event at the Carson Community Center.
Authors, aspiring writers, learn how to write, publish, and sell your book. Business owners, let people know where you're at, and much more. 323-750-3592. It's a free event. You heard right, free. And there's something for everybody. Go to blackwritersontour.com and register today. 323-750-3592.
Literacy is everybody's business. Black Writers on Tour, Saturday, March 25th, 2023, 10 to 3 p.m. I'm looking to see you face to face. 323-750-3592 or visit blackwritersontour.com. Don't miss it.
At Charmin, we heard you shouldn't talk about going to the bathroom in public, so we decided to sing about it.
Roll Charmin Ultra Strong when you drop in the beat. It cleans with way less effort on your seat. Yeah, roll it, drop it. Yeah, roll it, drop it. Okay. Charmin flows extra strong from the road. Your butt hella clean while you're sitting on the bowl. Yeah, it's all you need for that bathroom groove. Get you in and out without nothing to prove.
Charmin Ultra Strong cleans better so you can use less. Enjoy the go with Charmin.
Before new Cascade Platinum Plus, I would pre-rinse all my dishes because my old detergent just wouldn't get them clean. But now, I do dishes differently. And no pre-wash, no rewash, money-back guaranteed kind of different. Because Cascade Platinum Plus has double the grease fighting power of Dawn built right in, with twice the scrubbing power, giving me a clean that lets me break all the dish rules. I just scrape, load, and I'm done. Yep, so clean. With Cascade Platinum Plus, I dare to dish differently.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Let me not color my entry question too much for John Nichols. He doesn't need a lot of detail. He's covering this stuff every day. So the broad question to begin with, and then we'll get to the clapback. Your thoughts, John? I've not had a chance to talk to you since all this started to unfold a week ago, I guess last weekend, when Donald Trump suggested, I'm about to be indicted, I'm about to be arrested, and I want you all to know, and I'm calling for protest, and that really hasn't materialized, in part because if you follow what's happening online, the Trumpsters have figured out, many of them have argued, in fact, that showing up at these protests would get them in trouble, would get many of them arrested, like thousands have been following what happened on January the 6th. So Trump continues to call for protests. At the moment, at least, we don't see any evidence online that is actually materializing. Who knows what's happening, under the surface. But your thoughts, generally speaking, on the drama involving Donald Trump and his suggesting, I'm about to be arrested.
Well, he was wrong. He wasn't about to be arrested. It's obviously now we've gone for the better part of a week, and it may in fact be the case that there is an indictment. It may in fact be the case that there could be an arrest, but that hasn't happened yet. And I think that one of the things that we should really be concerned about at this point is a kind of the way the media, especially, has responded to this with an intensive coverage every day of, well, maybe it'll be tomorrow, maybe it'll be tomorrow, maybe it'll be today, maybe it'll be today. I think we run the risk of frankly, indictment fatigue, and that people, it's like the boy who cried wolf. If you keep saying it's going to happen and it doesn't happen, people at a certain point start to become dubious about what all's going on. To some extent, maybe Donald Trump wanted that to be the case, right? That there was confusion about this. But I would hope that our networks, our TV networks especially, turn to the legal experts on this, not the pundits, but the people who really know how a grand jury works. And I think what you will hear is that Alvin Bragg, for all the criticism he's getting, for all the attacks he's facing, has managed this in a very traditional, very responsible way. And grand jury takes time. Sometimes you realize you need more evidence. Sometimes you need more witnesses. And so I think a lot of the attacks on Bragg are incredibly unfair. And I think also that in general, we should pause, see what happens, and respond when it happens rather than spending days, even weeks, speculating and not covering sometimes the other really big stories like the stuff we've been talking about on this show.
Well, his office has finally clapped back. They sent a letter to Republican lawmakers saying that they lacked a legitimate basis for congressional inquiry, and further saying that their request for information only came forward after Donald Trump, to your point, created a false expectation that he would be arrested the next day, and his lawyers reportedly urged you to intervene. That's a quote directly from this letter sent from Alvin Bragg's office to the congressional Republicans who were insisting that he show up for a hearing. When we come forward in our remaining moments with John Nichols, I want to come back to just two things. One, the point he just made a moment ago about the way the media is covering this. I've indicted the media many, many times. I'm ashamed oftentimes of my own profession because when it comes to stuff like this, all they cover is the horse race. They can't really focus on what really matters, as John said, because they're covering the horse race. But it also underscores for me how Donald Trump, you can talk about Donald Trump all you want. It shows, even in this weakened state, that Donald Trump still knows how to control the media narrative. And they will still line up. The corporate media will still line up to cover the narrative that Donald Trump advances. And I want to get John's take on that. And then we'll close our conversation by bringing this thing full circle back to his new book with Bernie Sanders, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. And I've got one final question about that when we come forward with John Nichols.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. Today I spoke with Tatiana, a community manager for JP Morgan Chase.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Tatiana Roberts. I am a community manager for JP Morgan Chase. I have to honestly say that this has been the most fulfilling position that I've ever had, where I get to give back to the community because I saw my mom's struggles. That's really what fuels what I do to make sure that that the community has all the access to the resources that my mother didn't have.
So for the mother who's in business, what are 3 quick tips you can give to ensure that they're on the right path to accessing financial support from a bank like Chase?
Say number 1, just make sure that you're checking your credit on a consistent basis and taking action to either fix your credit, maintain your credit, or rebuild your credit. The second thing would be budget. I know that B word is kind of like ugly for, right? A lot of people don't like that B word, but it has to be done. We need to tell our money where to go. The last thing is to build a network of supporters that are going to lift you up.
The community building here in Crenshaw is that network. So visit the Chase Community Center on Crenshaw and Vernon. Meet a banker today. Tell them about your business. I'm Maisha Cairo in the community for KBLA with JP Morgan Chase.
Congratulations to Revolution Company for being this week's winner of KBLA's Office of the Week. Log on to KBLA1580.com to enter your office to win lunch for 10, delivered by John O'Groats Family Restaurant.
Periods don't care what you're doing, but your pad should. Get Always Triple Protection System in Always Day and Night Pads. Always Day Pads protect when active by wicking away gushes 2 times faster than leading store brands and giving us up to 100% leak-free and odor-free comfort. When we size up our pad at night, we get the same triple protection, plus up to 75% more coverage in the back for when we're laying down. No matter what, Always has you covered, day and night.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
John Nichols, I got 4 minutes left in conversation with you. Now, thank you, as always, my friend, for this hour. Very quickly here, what do you make of your own commentary? It seems to suggest to me, which I'm not, again, naive about, that Donald Trump, even in this weakened state, can still control a corporate news media narrative.
It's absolutely the case, and this is something that we should give Donald Trump credit for. I mean, he figured out long before just about anybody else in politics how to use social media to dominate traditional media.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons he became president of the United States in 2016. He continues to do that. The question is whether our media companies, our big media companies, have figured out, how this is really working. And it is, you blame Trump, you criticize Trump, but what you also have to recognize is that some of these media companies are so desperate for clicks and ratings that they go to, essentially a lowest common denominator of every debate, of every moment, and people click on Trump. And that's a challenge because we're now, what are we, 6 years into, 7 years into a period where essentially we have so much of our politics framed on one man rather than, on these broader issues and broader ideas.
Yep. Let me close on this note. I got 2 minutes left here. I want to close where we began. John Nichols is National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine, but he's also co-author of the new book with Senator Bernie Sanders. The book is called It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. And I want to close with this. Bill Clinton famously said years ago, as you well know, of affirmative action, mend it but don't end it. Well, we know that's about to not, we know it's about to get ended now. The affirmative action case, we're waiting on a final ruling from the Supreme Court. None of us is holding our breath. We know that affirmative action as we know it is about to end. My question is, if given your critique of capitalism that we discussed earlier in our conversation, how do we mend it but don't end it?
Look, the way to mend it but don't end it is to go back to our basic values, right? And to say that, a small business owner who's got a great idea, more power to him. But don't let some big multinational corporation or some incredibly wealthy person use their wealth to monopolize, create a monopoly within their own industry, and then also to monopolize our political discourse with campaign contributions, with lobbying, so that they end up getting in a stronger position. The fact of the matter is we have too many industries where there's too little competition and where there's too little creativity because we've ended up letting the super rich, the super big, the super powerful dominate so much of our discourse and, frankly, so much of our commerce.
Yeah. His name is John Nichols, and we respect him immensely. We love having him on this program as a contributor, and his book with Bernie Sanders out now is called It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. I highly recommend it. He is the National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine. John, we'll do it again, man. Thanks for your time. All the best to you, my friend.
I sure look forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Likewise. Thank you for coming on. Hour 2 of Tavis Smiley, after news, traffic, and sports. We're glad to have you tuned in. You are listening right now to Unapologetically Progressive, KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Students in the Los Angeles Unified School District will return to class tomorrow. Employees of the Trudeau Friday to affirm his administration's commitment to the U.S.-Canada